Welcome. This is Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner, practitioner, and our office is Asset Management Resources. Our show is Something More. We call it Something More because we like to talk about not only those important dollar and cents issues, but the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Thanks for being with us for our program. And we're recording our comments today on Thursday morning, and it is immediately following the debate. I'm joined by Jeff Perry, an advisory representative with our firm. And Jeff, let's talk about the debate.
Yeah, first one. So I guess the
Republican primary.
2024 presidential campaign has officially begun with this first debate. Last night it was more entertaining than I thought. Former President Trump wasn't there. He's sitting it out or whatever his strategy is. Who knows? But there were 8 members of the Republican Party seeking to be the next president, and they had to meet some threshold of so many donors and so many supporters and all that. So that's why there were 8. There's 12 total in the race. But I expected kind of with 8 people in the race, I expected it to be a little bit fractured, which it was, and boring, which it wasn't. I wasn't. It was 2 hours, and I was entertained the whole time, cheering on and a little booing here and there. And how about you? What was your general
Well,
impression?
because we were planning to talk about it, I was taking notes. I was.
Oh.
Of course, now I'm not going to refer to any of the notes because 2 hours worth of notes, right? But
You got a lot of notes.
yeah, but that being said, I guess my takeaway from it was I thought Nikki Haley had a standout evening, and was one of the people that I thought gave me cause to think maybe I'll give her a second look. And thought she did my favorite part was when she was schooling the rookie and telling him he was
Ramaswamy, yeah.
not up to the task or whatever.
So yes, I there's a lot of headlines, I guess, um, a lot of key points, but I completely agree that who won the debate. I could make arguments for a couple, but
I think there are a couple you could argue.
she definitely would get people's if people weren't watching her already. I think they, like you, would now say, well, wait a minute here. She's stronger, more articulate, more knowledgeable.
It
And
was a shame that she had to be, this aggressive, rude thing when for the standout moment. You know what I mean?
oh,
Like
I didn't view her as that. I viewed her as assertive, confident, and
assertive, but you
yeah.
don't have to violate the rules to be
Well,
a
yeah.
standout moment. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
for the people who are listening and didn't see it, the candidates were supposed to speak 45 seconds or a minute, depending on the question, with a 30-second response if their name was mentioned. And practically no one, really, no one
Adhered to those rules.
adhered to the rules. And at some point, it was getting ridiculous. And the moderators didn't do a good job. They had a little buzzer, but
Yeah.
I think if someone went over, they should have just turned the buzzer on and drowned them out or something, because it was
What's
bad.
up?
That was the worst part of the debate.
Um, so one could argue that Ramaswamy had a good night. I think he
No,
demonstrated that he wasn't up to the job.
yeah, I
Um,
completely agree.
I had, I think there's an argument that DeSantis had a good night, but I don't think he had a standout experience. I mean, it didn't. He just didn't show that he had. Um, uh, in my view, I think there were certain topics I just thought he did not respond properly to. Things relating to if the former president, were convicted, that he would still vote for him.
Hmm.
When it came to,
You're saying he didn't answer that question.
he didn't answer that at all, really. But I don't think
Yeah, I agree. He didn't answer the question. I know why he didn't answer the question, but he didn't answer the
there's an
question.
argument he's running for vice president. It keeps
No, no,
saying,
I don't see that. I'm saying that he didn't answer the question because he believes, and he may be correct in this, he believes that if he is going to be the candidate, to replace former President Trump, he cannot alienate
I think that's what
the
he's trying
Trump
to
base.
avoid.
He's
Yeah.
trying to walk that tightrope in.
Yeah. But I just I didn't think he had a good night. How did you feel about his performance?
So I'm a fan. For the listeners who don't know, my wife and I live in Florida, and so we love him as our governor. So we have a preconceived,
Yeah.
pre-presidential run view of him, and that's still sticking with us. But I'm objective as well. I think he had an okay night. I don't
Yeah.
think he hurt himself, but I don't think he rose above. He's in second place in most of the polls. So what he needs to do is to start rising above the field of the others, right?
Yeah.
And he did not do that. He had a solid night. If you like him, I don't think you like him less. But I don't think if you're looking at
Yeah.
all of them,
He
he
didn't
didn't
blow
stand
anything
up.
up. He didn't step on any landmines or anything. I think you're
Right.
right in that sense. But I also think he didn't demonstrate leadership. I think he had trouble. He had canned, prepared stuff, but when it came to impromptu responses, he wasn't fresh. He wasn't on his toes. I think at that part of the conversations.
I think
Uh,
that's fair. I think that's fair. I don't think he even as governor of Florida, he's not a tremendous public speaker.
yeah,
My support for him or my us liking him is based upon his performance as governor.
yeah, and he
So he
does rely on that quite a bit as like sort of his focal point, the experience he's had. And, I mean, all
that's
of them
legitimate.
to some
Yeah.
extent, say, I've had this role, I've had that role. And so that is, I think, probably his strength when he comes at this.
Right. Back to Ramaswamy for a minute because it's a
Yeah.
similar type of analysis. He had a lot of stump lines and
Oh,
i-
inch deep, right?
right. So when he was allowed, like, his opening was a good opening and his closing is a good closing because he had prepared those.
Yeah.
But when he got into the substance of an issue, I mean, he was just terrible on Ukraine, terrible on Israel, terrible about most issues.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ruling him in, but now I'm ruling him out. I don't think he's ready
Yeah.
to
I mean,
go forward.
he was the youngest person on the stage, of course, and he's the non-politician of the group. And I think he's trying to be the not Trump, say some, outrageous things at times and try to get that traction.
I think
Uh,
he's more unpredictable than Trump. Some of
yeah,
those, some of those, some of those
I don't think so.
positions, some of those positions that he's taking on foreign policy are either, I'll give him credit. They're either ill-informed or they're outright dangerous. So,
Yeah, I
he,
think that was what I thought was the moment kind of that I was talking about with Nikki Haley, where she really kind of made that case pretty effectively, I
he did.
thought. Um,
She did. I also,
so
what do you
yeah,
think of
please.
what do you think of the outliers, Governor Hutchinson?
Yeah, so the governors on the ends who are
Right.
very low in the polls. Um, well, as you know, I like Governor Hutchinson
Hmm.
as he comes across to me in the traditional mold of what a president should be, is in the sense of someone who's articulate, someone who makes a good argument, someone who's had all kinds of
Sure.
valuable experience, seems ready to step into the job,
I
that
would
kind of
agree.
thing.
Yep.
That being said, and I thought he made a really interesting argument about the 14th Amendment issue with if the former president is actually convicted. There was a question to the candidates: would they still support President Trump if he was to get the nomination?
Yeah. It's funny that you like that.
I thought that was a pretty articulate way to say, yeah, no. And it's shocking to me how many of the candidates would still support. And I thought it was also a good point. He said that if that it'd be unlikely that the Republican National Committee would support someone who was a convicted felon, because the question that he raised was, would that person even be eligible to serve? Because the 14th Amendment says that someone who's I think it was about insurrection,
It
but
is.
uh,
However, I was disappointed by that answer. Not disappointed by the like the meaning of the answer. I think it's a very good question to ask the candidates convicted because you can have the position quite credibly that this is the weaponization of the Justice Department against Trump, and he's innocent until proven guilty, and this is all just
Times and
this is
by
just a witch hunt.
states
But
as
it's
well as federal government. Oh
right.
yeah, oh, yeah,
But it's a
sure.
different it's a different story to me, and I think should be a different story to voters if he's convicted by a jury of his peers, meaning citizens.
Right.
So I like the question, but however, Governor Hutchinson, a very knowledgeable guy, is using that argument, but President Trump isn't charged with insurrection. So he's factually wrong. He's charged with a bunch of things, 91 things. I'm not saying he's not charged with a lot of things, but
Yeah.
January 6th charges, he was never charged with the insurrection.
I
So
think he's making an interesting case that though it will come up in court, it will be pressed against him that would therefore disqualify him. But I follow your point.
guess I got my lawyer hat on. I don't think the argument's on point. The 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 general argument is definitely on point, but I didn't like that he went there
Yeah,
because
to,
it's not
to
a
answer your question, I thought he had a good night, despite having far less stage time
sure.
than most of the other candidates. That being said, as much as I still think he's interesting, I think to your earlier when we had a conversation like this, he's not getting traction.
No, he's not.
We'll see if he gets any traction. I just don't see it happening at this point. I think the two governors on the ends can go home.
I don't think they'll go home yet, but
You know what I mean? You know
there's
what I mean? But you know what I'm saying?
they're a step closer to going home. I
Yeah,
I I,
yeah.
I agree with that. Chris Christie had a good night. So
I thought so
a
too.
lot of people like him, and a lot of people don't like him. I get that. I'm just talking about his debate
Performance.
performance.
Yeah.
He was, and I saw him actually the next day on some of the news outlets, and I think his argument of even if what President Trump, this is kind of Christie's campaign. He is
Yeah.
the
Anti.
anti-Trump candidate, and he's not apologizing for that. I think his argument, his statements, whatever you want to call them, of even if what former President Trump has done is not illegal, the conduct is below the office of the president.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a compelling argument to the American people because we have to remember, even if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Republican here and you're trying to pick your candidate, we have to pick someone. I'm a Republican. I'm disclosing that. I'm saying we. The Republican Party has to pick someone who can win the general election. And so that argument by Chris Christie is a compelling argument for the Republican Party
Yeah.
to consider.
And
Who on
his
that
track
stage that
record
is.
as governor, having worked in a blue state, all that kind of stuff uh, does work in his favor. I think, he's kind of abrasive and, can be, not everyone's cup of tea, so to speak. But I do think he's taken on that mantle of making that argument. And I think he's made it pretty effectively. Thought he did last night, at least.
Yeah.
And then, but to your point about winning a general election, one of the hardest topics that's probably going to come at the Republicans in the general election and the public, where the mainstream of the country is when it comes to the topic of abortion, is the Republican Party reflective of where the country is as a whole? And so I don't know the answer to that, but I thought again this was a place where Nikki Haley had a response that would serve well in a general election, perhaps better than some of the other candidates who were making interesting arguments. Particularly, Senator Scott was one of the ones who was saying, "Yeah, none of that states' rights kind of thing. Let's let a federal government solve this problem."
Mhm.
Kind of the opposite of what has been the mainstream Republican mindset for many years prior to the Dodd's decision. Is that what it was? Dodd's.
Right, overturning Roe versus Wade,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Dobbs. I like Tim Scott. I think he's a very positive person. I think he's a good senator. I think he makes an
Compelling
interesting,
personal story for sure.
very good story. I think he'd be a fine president. However, I disagree with him on this issue, and I actually would have been, if I'm giving the best grade for this, the abortion answer, I'm giving it to the governor of North Dakota, because you were alluding to it. Ever since Roe versus Wade, the Republicans have been arguing a constitutional argument that the issue of abortion is not in the Constitution, therefore it belongs to the states, a 10th Amendment kind of foundational principle. And I legally, I concur with that. Constitutionally, I think that's a winning argument.
Answer was sound on that, in that he's like, "That's the end. That's our
A-
position."
And when he was Governor Bergstrom, when he was answering this question, he was reaching in his pocket, and I'm going, "What's he doing? Does he have some notes on this?" And he pulls out the Constitution, which
Oh,
I
that's funny.
thought was perfect, because that is what Republicans have, in my opinion, correctly been arguing constitutionally, that this issue belongs to the states, and that's where we are. So that's the answer that I wanted to hear from the candidates. So I was disappointed when many of the Republican candidates were saying, um, this belongs to the federal government, and if president, I will, insert my point of view, because that's not where it belongs. The federal government has no role in this, in my opinion. So Nikki Haley's point about, let's be real about this,
Yeah, I thought hers was a pragmatic kind of response. Let's get real about how this would work.
and back to the general election, I think she had the most compelling or most attractive answer. I assume it's how she really feels as well. It's back staying on Nikki Haley. I think if somebody won last night, it was her.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was my takeaway as well. What'd you think of Mike Pence's performance? He got a lot of high marks from commentators, I thought.
I would agree. I would agree. I like Mike Pence. I liked him as vice president. I thought he did his constitutional duty. That was one of the questions on
Yeah, it
January
was
6th. I applaud him for that. I've read his book. It's a very compelling book. If you people who want to consider him, and I thought he did well. He did better than I thought he would do. He was strong. He was assertive. He was himself. So I
Yeah, I
think
think he was really clearly making a play for Iowa when he was appealing to. He talked about his faith quite a bit, as did Tim Scott.
yep.
He was, really kind of trying to appeal to that, religious right kind of voter, to kind of say, "Hey, my faith is real, and here's, how it plays into my views." I think a lot. I don't know. Maybe that's an over. Uh,
I disagree. He was playing to them. I would counter with that. Is that's who Mike Pence is? If
well,
you
I'm
like,
not saying there was a ploy. I'm just saying he was clearly aiming his remarks and his attempt to try to appeal to that voter, because I agree. I think that is who he is.
yes, I agree on that point. He will speak like that and talk about his faith, even if it's in a crowd that may not be to his benefit. He is solidly operating and living and doing his job based upon his views on the Constitution and his faith in God. He's very clear on that all the time. It was So are we missing anyone? Who have we missed here in the
Let's see.
contest?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the North Dakota governor was Burgum.
Yeah, yeah. He did
Um,
okay on the one question, but otherwise he was
he was a non-factor, I
he
think.
was a non-factor.
Um, yeah, I guess my question to you is, in sort of a summation, does it matter today? The former president will be headed to Georgia, and getting a booking photo and fingerprinted and all that for the Georgia trial.
For the state charges, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Is that
matter. That's a good
presumably
question.
will suck all the oxygen out of the room. People will have forgotten about the debate in about 10 minutes, if they even heard about it. Um, so, and he remains, by a widespread majority, leading the Republican polls, and arguably leading the national polls at this point, which I think is hard to believe, frankly, that he has a chance at in the national polls.
Well, President Biden's approval numbers, whether it be on anything, mostly the economy,
economy.
are just so low that it's like I think a generic Republican or any Republican on that stage would probably do very well against President Biden. Whether or not he'll ultimately be the candidate or not, I'm still skeptical. I know they're saying all those things because they don't want to make him a lame duck. Once he says he's not running, he's an ineffective leader, the lame duck theory. But so does it matter for Republican voters? I think it matters. I think it matters for if you do really well or really bad in these debates. So, I think it matters for Nikki Haley. It might matter for Chris Christie, and it probably matters in a negative way. It probably matters for Ramaswamy that so many people who liked his enthusiasm, his youth, his canned speeches,
Yeah.
will see him now as someone who's not fit
Do
to
you
be
think that
president.
that's the way, say, people who are, big Trump fans will, do you think they'll see him as like, oh, if things don't work out for Trump, I'll go for this guy? Or do you think they'll jump to another candidate?
I don't know, but I think
If that were to happen, I mean, I don't see that even happening at this point, but just if that were to be the case.
I think this could be the beginning of people starting to peel off of their support for President Trump because they see alternatives.
Yeah, if there's something they think is viable and appealing.
So yes, that's how I view it. I'm not a I'm not a Trump
Yeah.
supporter, if you will. I think there's better candidates out there for the Republican Party and to lead this country. So I'm
So,
hoping that's what happens. So I don't know if I'm just trying to be optimistic for what I'd like
yeah.
to see happen, or if I'm being objective. But
Been there, done that, right?
right, but if you're a Republican voter, even if you're supported Trump in the past, I voted for President Trump last time. I'm happy to admit that. But if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for maybe a younger person, which is certainly part of the debate. I was glad that they asked that question last night because it's relevant to this. If you're looking for someone who's qualified, has experience, and could lead not just the Republican Party, but win a general election and lead the nation, I think there's a couple of candidates on that stage that have the opportunity through these debates and
Yeah.
in the future as well to show that they are a viable alternative um, to do that and to beat Joe Biden if he's the nominee of the Democratic Party.
What was interesting to me is one of we haven't had a discussion on fiscal discipline in a while.
Hmm.
And that came up a couple of times last night that it seems like that this reality is bubbling up as a worry point. I didn't think it was going to be a factor in this election. I thought it would be more relevant in the next presidential election as we get closer to the Social Security
Hmm.
viability challenges, 2033 or whatever it is. And so I was kind of expecting the topic of fiscal responsibility was going to be put off a while. But it did come up a couple of times, and I was glad to hear that because I do think that's something we need to give some attention to.
Yeah, you got to give props to Nikki Haley on that one as well.
Yeah.
She called out both parties, and because both parties are overspending. I mean, you can be a, you can be a critic of President Biden for his overspending and the way he's treating the economy or not treating the economy, however you want to view it. But you
Yeah.
have to recognize that under President Trump and the Republicans, when they're in control, they spent a lot of money
Yeah.
as well, $8 trillion on COVID under President Trump. So
Well, I thought
there's
that was a topic that both, as it turns out, Christie and Hutchison, who I thought did a good job last night. They also touched on that in
Mhm.
their experience as governor. I think DeSantis has a good track record on that as
He
well.
does. Yeah.
So I think the governors, that may be something they pay attention to, that kind of thing. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting debate. I enjoyed it. I'm hopeful that it creates a little bit more interest in some of these candidates, and we
Right.
can see if this expansive lead that former President Trump has, whether it stays, as you said, and I also concede. I don't think he's the right person for the next election. I think there's too much baggage, too much chaos the last time around, some good policies that, when it came to certain things we liked, but I think there's got to be a better option.
Well, there's other candidates on that stage that agree with his policies, but have a different character and different approach.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting discussion. I'm sure. I guess we got another one in a month or so. Maybe we'll
We do.
see if we'll talk about it again. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for a little bit of chit chat about this. It was kind of fun to watch. And all right, everyone, next month, get your popcorn. Get ready.
Yeah, at the Reagan Library. That will be
That's
very
right.
historic and quite a backdrop.
All right. That's it for now. Until next time, keep striving for something more.